Hello, day drinkers. Welcome to Day Drinking with Authors. You're listening to, well, I messed that up already. Welcome to Day Drinking with Authors. You're listening to me, Molly Fader, Molly O'Keefe. My guest tonight is Katee Robert. And if you are a romance reader and you have not picked up one of her dark retellings of either of the Disney heroes or Disney villains, or her new series, Dark Olympus, you are missing out. Which is another way all to say that tonight will probably be R-rated. So if that is not your thing, don't. You might want to turn this off, but it's going to be pretty R-rated. So I'm going to read the back cover copy of Neon Gods. This is book, Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Shoot. We're going to read the back cover copy of Electric Idol. Wow. I'm a mess tonight. This is the second book in the Dark Olympus series. Sorry about that. In the ultra-modern city of Olympus, there's always a price to pay. Psyche Dimitru knew she'd have to face Aphrodite's jealous rage eventually, but she never expected her literal heart to be at stake, or for Aphrodite's gorgeous son to be the one ordered to strike the killing blow. Eros has no problem shedding blood. Raised to be his mother's knife in the dark, he's been conditioned to accept that he's more monster than man. But when it comes time to take out his latest target, he can't do it. Confused by his reaction to Psyche's unexpected kindness, he does the only thing he can think to keep her safe. He binds her to him, body and soul. Psyche didn't expect to find herself married to the glittering city's most dangerous killer, but something about Eros wakens a fire inside her she's never felt before. As lines blur and loyalties shift, Psyche realizes Eros might take her heart after all, and she's not sure she can survive the loss. That sounds good, guys. That sounds good. Let's get Katee in here. Hello, Katee.
Hello.
Thanks for taking the time to come and chat with us tonight.
Heck yeah, I'm very excited to be here. I got my drink.
I admitted to Katee in our quick therapy session before we started talking to you guys that I was a half a drink in, which explains my stumbling stutters. But maybe it'll get better, maybe it won't. So Katee, we're going to talk about the Dark Olympus series as a whole, but I want to talk about about Electric Idol and how you just I guess we can talk about this in terms of the whole series too, but what about this myth, felt so perfect to adopt into a romance, and how did you modernize it for your world?
So Psyche and Eros is one of the only Greek myths that ends in a happily ever after. They all of them are tragedy. It's all they're turned into a nymph, or they're murdered, or something terrible happens. And Hades and Persephone, and to a greater extent Psyche and Eros, are the two main ones where it's wow, they get to be together and no one
doesn't have to make that part up.
Yeah. And so the various versions of the myths really are very Beauty and the Beast. They follow the same beats, and or technically east of the sun, west of the moon, because there's some trials in there, but I didn't let those out for my book because it's it's the Beauty of the Beast that I wanted. And to me, Eros's gift, making people fall in love, is the most horrifying thing I could think of. Honestly, being forced to be in love without choosing it is the scariest power of all. And so it just made sense for me to be of course he just murders people in my world, because my world doesn't have there's magical elements sorta, but it's more contemporary,
right?
And so I was of course he's a hitman, for his mom, because
right. It only makes sense, truthfully, when you think about it. The guy who's walking around shooting arrows at people, of course he's a hitman. And how weirdly monstrous is it to want to force people into love? Yeah,
it just made sense thematically, and Aphrodite being no, you're gonna get that and take care of that and clean up that. And then Psyche in the myth, she's a princess, I think. There's princesses and nymphs, they kind of overlap in my head anyways. But in my world, because the Greek myths, one, are incestuous as hell, and two, it's just really scattershot of that kingdom and that kingdom, and so I condensed it for simplicity's sake. And so I made Psyche, Persephone, Callisto, and Eurydice. God, I had to think that. Yeah, are all Demeter's daughters, which is not true to myth, but it is in my world. Just for because you like that sequel bait. You like to have everybody.
Oh, connected. Yeah.
And so yeah, it just made sense. It's very Beauty and the Beast, like what makes a monster? Oh, he's my monster. And how I pitch this story is that Eros is basically a murderous feral cat that Psyche is nice to one time, and he follows her home and is like, we're gonna get married. And like that is the book, basically. Like he would fight a
Really?
cloud if it rained on her on purpose. Like
You've managed to make like an arranged, not arranged, but a marriage of convenience, marriage of safety a part of this book. And you've also made her like, I mean, all of us, I think, with the delight that we're going into these books is based in some part about how much we loved high school mythology.
yeah, absolutely.
That Helen Hamilton book, was it Helen Hamilton? Anyway, but you made Psyche like who in the myth that I remember is adored and admired, but nobody will ever love her. She can't find love. Like her, again, in the one that I read, sisters got married in these big feasts, but she couldn't find love. And you made her this like very savvy sort of influencer, but she never falls in love because she knows that her emotions run wild with her. Like she keeps herself very, very safe from love. So the setup of those two is just prime.
It is so great because she knows that about herself. She's like, I can't separate sex and emotions. Like that's not how I
And she says it
operate.
right before they have sex.
Right. And he's like, no, we should definitely have sex just because you flinch when I touch you. And so that definitely makes logical sense that if we had sex, then people will believe this is real. And it's like, Eros. Like
That worked for me.
Great.
I was like, yeah, you guys should. You really should.
It makes perfect logical sense. No one asked too many questions. We're going. Like
is part of the joy of this whole series, and I mean, I wonder if it's part of the joy of all of the sort of retellings that you're doing, where you land on an idea that marries your world so perfectly to the myth or the story or whatever. Not, it doesn't marry, but clicks in perfectly, like turns it on its head. Like, is that like that's got to be such a fucking thrill?
It is, just because like, so I am like, people have really strong feelings about both fairy tales and myths, which I as well, like all my tattoos are fairy tales. And so, but I'm kind of obsessed with oral tradition, or how these stories change with the times and the societies telling them. And you can see it like draw like the lines through like history. And so it's really fun to take these myths that, and I'm not the first one to do this, obviously. People have been retelling Greek myths since the beginning of time, but it's really like fun for me to take it and be like, okay, like how do I make this myth? Like the first two books are as close to like retellings as possible. After this, it's like throw the freaking book out. You're gonna get the elements. You're gonna get like the like emotional payoff. Like if you are familiar with the stories, you will enjoy these if you're willing to like get on this roller coaster with me. But I write romance, not tragedies, and so
Yeah.
no, I've been saying lately, and I'm sure that people are like tired of this, but like I write like the Fast and Furious version of Greek myths. Like it's like really intense. We're going on a ride, get in the car. It's going to be like, family first. Like don't ask too many questions about the logistics. Like it's going to be a sexy wild ride. And that's what this series is.
I mean, that's what with mythology is anyway. I mean, if they're not having sex with swans and birthing babies from their heads, then
golden shower. Yes. And it's so, because the myths are so bonkers. And so taking that and kind of bringing that bonkersness into a more contemporary type setting with a more like feminist, like anti-fuckboy, like, because the entire third book is me being like, fuck Paris, he's the worst, we hate him. so
when you like, I'm imagining you like, I don't know, 2 years ago, like just living your life, walking around, and suddenly being like, wait, can I do this with myths? Can I do retellings with myths? Was it a lightning strike idea? And then when you're like, no, someone has to have done erotic myth retelling.
Oh, they definitely have. Like, I mean, before Neon Gods came out, I think I did a post for somebody that was like, while you're waiting for this, read these other Hades Persephone erotic retellings.
Mm.
And I just pulled 6 that I was familiar with, and I guarantee you there are more. So they're definitely out there. But the Villains series, the second book is Hades. And so I was like, I want to write a Hades and Persephone telling because I'm deeply obsessed with that myth, like everybody else. And like, how do I do that in a way? And that's kind of where like the title system came from, is because I needed two Hades. I needed a way for two Hades to exist. But
In your world,
yeah,
one
that's
Hades is not enough.
no, nope. And so, but then it was just like, okay, well, Greek myths naturally, like I mentioned earlier, kind of dovetail really nicely with fairy tales in that they are very familiar stories to a lot of us. And so you can play a little more fast and loose with them, which anytime you do retellings, you get people that are like more like
Yeah.
classic and they like, or purists, and they're like, no, this is wrong. And it's like, yeah, but it's it. So
When you were creating this, like when you started to build your world, I'm interested in two different parts of this. One is like the logistics. You're like, okay, I'm going to need a city, and I'm going to need a city to be kind of in two parts, and I'm going to need the river, and you get this map at the front of your book, like it's all pretty awesome. But I want to ask about the logistics and how tricky that was, and how it kind of continues to be tricky, but also the aesthetic of the world, because you are also building an aesthetic, and it is modern and current, but there's something that feels super old school about it, like almost historical romancy in the best way. Like that's as a compliment. So
yeah, yeah,
tell me
yeah.
about those two things: logistics, aesthetic.
So I think I naturally write. It's like it's historical slash paranormal, like those vibes in a contemporary setting, because you get like a lot of marriage of conveniences in my books. You get a lot of these like really powerful people who also aren't necessarily in control of their lives. And so that's kind of the element I was playing with, in that like if there are different rules, and the rules are more like old school, like historical, or and I feel like a lot of paranormal rules are like old school historical, and that they're like, you have your family lines and you're like
Hierarchy, yeah.
politics, and you're marrying for politics and stuff. And so pulling on that, I mean, we see it in like mob romance, and like anytime there's territories, because like I love a territory. I love a territory with my whole heart. And I'm always writing basically some version of like mob stuff. And that's what this
Mhm.
is too, is because they have their territories and their responsibilities, and even the titles themselves are divided up very intentionally like that. Um and then as far as like aesthetically, like, or because the river Styx, like it's like, how do I make part of the city but still the city, but like the underworld, and like it, the lower and upper city, but without making it like a class thing, because it's not meant to
Yeah.
be like upper class, lower class, or anything like that. And so it was really fun to build that out, because I write very shallow in my first drafts, and so my editor's like, what's the world look like? And I'm like, oh.
What is everybody wearing, Katie?
Yeah, like how are these different? And so kind of deciding on those details. And like I love the lower city, and like you don't see as much in the second book, but just some of the elements on like how they have these carvings on like certain doorways and stuff that kind of like throw back to like the original myths
Mhm.
and stuff was just so fun. And the upper city very much reflects the values of the powerful people in the upper city, and that when you're in the city center, it's like glitz and glamour and concrete and glass and steel. And as you move further out, you get more like personality.
Right, right.
um yeah, so and the barrier elements were added later, just because my editor's like, why don't they ever leave? Like, there needs to be a reason why they can't just leave. And I was like,
And you're like,
that's
stop
fair.
with these questions.
I know.
Stop
I'm
with
like,
these.
they just don't. It's fine. And she's like, but it doesn't, like, how, like, and so, which worked out really well, because the barrier plays a really important part in the series now,
Mhm.
like as the series develops. But it's one of those things that, like I said, I Fast and Furious, and then my editor's like, hey, let's slow down and like talk about the world a little bit. Like, throw us a detail or two, Katie. Like, what are they wearing? So it's not all naturally. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I'm happy with how I've kind of fleshed out the world and like played with elements.
I find it really interesting, and this is a question that I want to get back to a little bit later. But I feel like the aesthetic and the logistics and the mythology and the sort of paranormal historical vibe, all of it is so ripe for fandom. Like it's the thing. Like I'm reading this book and I'm remembering when I first started reading romance, and I had this like vision of what if all of these people, and I started reading with historical romance, what if they were all in the same ballroom. Like, of course they would know each other. Judith McNaught's guys and
Yep.
Julie Garwood's guys, they would all know each other. And I feel like you've created this situation that is so ripe for fandom that romance readers love. I mean, they dig it so much. And are you feeling that about these books, that the intensity from the fans is different?
Yes, it's been really interesting because I've been doing this for 10 years. So it's not like I'm not new to writing or anything. And while my villain series last year did outsell like everything by like an absurd amount because TikTok found it, the response to Dark Olympus has been very different. Like I'm seeing fan arts, people are cosplaying the characters, like, and that's never happened to me before. So it's very like, oh, this is obviously hitting a note that I haven't hit previously. And I do think that's part of it. It's just that it's like a grown-up Gossip Girl. And
Yeah.
like, and there's that element of
But violent and deadly and
yeah, it's like it's so self-indulgent because it's all my favorite things. I'm like, it's powerful people and they can do murder and they're all dressed, really nice all the time and beautiful and like, and it's just, so it's fun to see that kind of those id list items resonate with people in a way that I had hoped, but like
Yeah.
honestly, you never really expect it. Like you're kind of like, wow, I
Yeah.
hope people like it, and then like
You're like, whoa, people
yeah,
really liked it.
I'm like, I guess we're gonna write. I've never been so grateful that traditional moves so slowly that I just turned in book 4, so I'm distant enough from the releases that I'm like, because if I was trying to write book 3 right now, nope. Like with people reacting to book
Yeah,
2
yeah.
in real time, like
But with
it.
I mean, as a person who's done trad too, and done a series in trad, that time lag also allows you as a writer who's maybe fast and furious to paint yourself in a couple of different corners and be like, God, shit. Did I really say that in book 1? Is that the rule I made? Like, have you run into that?
Sort of, but this series was actually going to be indie. Like I had planned on it being indie because I was like, I'm just gonna like, I know I want to write it. I know I want it to be like a long ass series. Like, and trad doesn't do long series, so like, and so I had mapped it out like, because sometimes when an author, you can tell they like sold the first 3, and then there's sort of like a little lag for like a book or 2 where they before they find their feet and run again.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want that. I want to make sure because I'm a pantser, but I need like something to shoot at.
A plan.
Yeah, and so I had plotted out like 3 arcs within the greater arc of the series, and like to kind of keep me on my like put my bumpers on. And I recently, because I finished book 4, and there's a pivot point in there that I wasn't expecting, and it kind of changed things a little bit. So I had to go back and like finagle some things. So now the book series, if everything goes to plan, would be 10 books. But
wow, fans are gonna love that. That makes everybody happy.
Yeah, there's 7 books contracted, which is holy shit. But
yeah.
We'll see what happens. But I 10 books. I know where it ends. So having that kind of like, here's where we're aiming for, helps me to like I know approximately the couples or the relationships or whatever. So I have my bumpers on to keep me from like, if I paint myself into a corner, it's usually a small thing, not like oh fuck, like
yeah,
how. So
did I not say they had wings? They have wings.
well, and just like I had planned on like in book 1, Orpheus is such a freaking just he's the worst. And because I had initially pitched their book Orpheus and Eurydice to have book 3, and my editor's like, like we don't like it doesn't feel as strong enough. And I was like, that's cool, fair. So I was like, well, I won't worry about them having a book. And then like I wrote that, and I saw this like piece of art. I can't remember who the artist is, but I bought it. But it's like a lady on like Charon's boat, and like wrapped in it's just beautiful. And he's the ferryman. And I was like, oh, Eurydice and Charon. And my editor, like, because I just shit post on Twitter all the time, and she saw me and like emailed me. She's like, what about Eurydice and Charon and Orpheus? And I was like, yes, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect, because then you have this like this element added in that makes it so much more compelling, and especially now with the backdrop of like where the series is going. So like that's the thing that's going to happen.
Katee, I want to really quickly pick apart that entire thing that you just said and talk about the magic in each of those elements, or the unicornness of each of those elements. So a lot of authors, when they're deep in a series, when they're thinking about a series, you're so locked in, you're running out of inspiration. So you saw this painting and you were inspired. And you put it out on Twitter, and you have an editor that you have a relationship with that will respond to that tweet with an idea about your book. I mean, that's all of that's pretty mad.
It's honestly because, like, you know, I've been with traditional up until like 2018. I had several publishers over the course of like the years leading up to that, and I'm very used to them telling me no. Like,
Yeah.
because, you know, I've always been a bonkers writer, but I've been constrained because it's like, well, marketing won't like that, or the retailers won't like that, or that's not a thing we can really do with the environment. And so it's still very wild to me that I can just shoot off an email and be like, what if instead of Aphrodite and Hephaestus, we have Aphrodite and Hephaestus and Pandora? And then my editor will come back and like, what if, yes, and it's a polynot and add somebody else in? And I was like, I can do that?
Yeah.
Like in traditional, like what? And so I think that's part of the magic, is that they're kind of like giving me my freaking reign, letting me run with it in a way that's.
But your editor's excited in the way that we dream editors would be excited when.
And marketing is excited too, because that's the thing that, like, where it all falls apart is your editor can be your biggest champion, but if like marketing isn't on board with it, then it's like, well, how do we position this? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do think an element of that is that it's like we're talking books 5 and 6, and so at that point the series is either going to be doing its fine thing or nobody's going to be reading it, so like they're willing to take more risks with me.
You know,
but
it's funny, back to the idea of the aesthetic with those covers and the titles. Were the titles yours, or was that brainstormed? I mean,
that was
the Neon Gods seems like the kind of, like, if you're brainstorming ideas, you're like, oh, nonsense. But then when you think about it, it absolutely encapsulates the aesthetic of the books.
Yeah, I sold that book under Forbidden Fruit was the title. And I'm terrible at titles. So they're like, can we change it? And I was like, do it. Like, congratulations. I don't care. Like, I'm not married to titles. And so every title since, because it's Neon Gods, Electric Idol, Wicked Beauty, and then Radiant Sin is the 4th one. And they've kind of like, it's like a hodgepodge of words, but it just makes sense. Like,
yeah, a little bit. It's like they've done a title creator. but I mean, really all that matters is that first one, and the first one is sets you up for this. Like, it really is amazing. So I have another question for you. These are erotic romances. Everything that I've read of yours is erotic. I would call it erotic. You know, story and plot and character happens during sex scenes. So they're not just sexy contemporary romances. They are erotic novels because so much happens through the sex. And Entertainment Weekly has called your writing unspeakably hot.
Yeah.
Which is like amazing, but it's also, and can be, like a bit of a cross too. Like, do you talk to me about how you approach sex scenes, how you tie them to character and how you tie them to plot? Like, do they just, you're like, all right, time to have a sex scene, here we go? Or are you thinking about these all the way through the brainstorming?
It's sort of a mixture, because it's like the character really informs how this, or the characters and their dynamic really informs how the sex, like, I find out the most about my characters when I'm writing sex scenes, because like I didn't know that Apollo was going to be a soft dom and Cassandra was going to have a praise kink until like I got in there and I'm like, oh, this is very soft and praisey. Like, okay. And so I do worry, like I did, because the first one was more like explicitly kinky, I was concerned the second one wasn't as hot, because the nature of the beast is they're not jumping right into, I mean, they are jumping right into bed together, but not quite with the same like, yay, that Persephone and Hades were. Like, it just feels a little different.
Yeah, there's a bit of baggage.
And but the mirror stuff, like, because my editor's like, look, like, there, you know, there's the chair or whatever in the first one. Like, what if it was mirrors in the second one, because it thematically matches both of their character growth? And I was like, that makes sense, and also that's really hot. Like, let's do it. So that was added in edits, or shifted in edits. But in the third book, it's not, there's no like thing that you like hang it on, like a mirror or a chair or anything. Right. It's just them being messy. So it just it just happens organically, I guess. Like, I don't usually decide going in like this is how it's going to be. It's usually like I'm writing and a character will say something. I'll be like, oh shit, like okay, I guess we're doing that now. And which makes me sound like a crazy person when I say that, but like other authors get it. Like when you're like an intuitive writer, like the story kind of informs itself, and then I have to go back and change things. But yeah, I definitely like I have my like heat threshold that I don't usually fall below. And in every
What
single
can you tell us what that is? Like what can you like talk about that? Like is that just something you know? You're like, nah, this is too tame, or you like and
well,
is that your choice? Is that what you think readers are expecting so you don't want to shift? Like how does that all work
it's
out in your head?
it's I think going indie and not and again having some of those marketing expectations taken away that I didn't I just had to worry about like what I wanted to, not like selling to 6 different people before it ever reached the reader. Um Kind of like freed me up to sort of experiment with where my natural heat level of writing is. But in every single book, I'm like, I don't know if this is hot enough. Like, I don't know if this is hot enough. And then something happens and I'm like, did I go too far? I might have gone too far. And like I I am very curious though, because the fourth book is my version of a slow burn in that there are orgasms, but there's not like P and V until probably like 75% of the way through the book, which is not my normal at all. So I'm like, I don't know. I will see what my editor says because she, helps me keep things. But it's just for that couple, that's the only thing that made sense. Because
Yeah.
so it's always an adventure. I'm always like I always doubt myself in every single book. I'm like, maybe this will be the book that's just not hot. And then, we figure it out.
It's funny like as I write in varying heats too, and the book dictates, the characters dictate, my mood dictates, right? Sometimes characters just want to talk about their dogs and their relationships with their moms, and that's just how
And sometimes you write one of the hottest books I've ever read, and they don't even have like proper sex, like in Stolen Hearts. Is that the first one's title?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I just like the whole book, I was like, oh my God.
I know, but it is funny how the characters in the book reflects on itself. Like you had said that, like it reflects on itself. But then there are times that you're just like, fuck, I gotta write this scene. I need 5,000 words of engaged and tense. Oh, my dog. Okay, she wants back in. The door is cracked open, and she doesn't realize that it just looks like I don't know. She's pretty, but not so smart.
I will say when I'm writing and if I'm like so not checked into that, I'll just leave it in brackets, which I always hate it later when I have to go back to it, but trying to force it. Yeah, or even like I'll be like, I'm forcing this. This sucks. It's not hot. But like when I go back and read through, it's easier to like flush it out and make it hot. But yeah, writing a sex scene when you're like, this sucks. Everybody sucks. These characters suck. Like, it's not my favorite.
So you had said something earlier that you had a contract until 2018. You were working with a trad publisher, and then you were done with the contract in 2018. And that struck me because I feel like I've been watching you for the last few years, and you're like a writer unboxed. You're like absolutely hurtling downhill, like body checking as you go. Like no one's telling me what to do. Is that a product of finally being released from this? Is it the product of going indie? Though you were doing indie stuff, is it
I think so. Like it was a combination of things because like I started in category, like not with Entangled Brazen, and like that's very constrained and like you can't do this, you can't do that. The heroes have to fit this specific criteria. The heroines can't be too bitchy, which I love a bitchy heroine, and like so I was constantly being told no, like constantly. And I wrote really a ton of books in the course of a couple of years, and then I sold my Mop series to Grand Central, and that was more like, oh, I can do this. Like I didn't know I could do this, but there's still. And I loved my editor. We had a really great relationship. But, there's still things that she's like, well, you can't have a book in this series, like with the way we have it set up. And I'm very happy with that series. But then the market shifted and went like rom-com-ish. And I can't write a rom-com. Like I tried and it was garbage. And thankfully it did not sell because I would have hated trying to like force that. But And like the market dropped out for me and suddenly I couldn't pay my bills. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to get a real job. I was like, okay, no, like we're gonna go indie. We're gonna try. Like I was super burned out. I had tried to launch a spin-off series with Grand Central and it failed. And I wrote this like 18,000 word little novella thing that was a menage that was solely because of like I don't know if you remember back like in 2018 Harlequin had those commercials that was like the book boyfriend commercials that they
Yeah.
the Viking and like, but the Prince one cracked me up because she's like the whole time is like, I don't know if I want this, like she seemed very confused the whole time. And I was like, oh yeah, what if like, you know, the bodyguard, and then I was like, what if the bodyguard and the prince? And so it just started this like chasing joy, and there's been bumps along the way, but like I found that I'm happiest when I'm like, maybe I'm going too far, and I'm not going as far as some authors, but just for me.
Right, right.
And there's this element of magic that because I write so fast normally, throwing shit out onto the internet and having people like have real-time reactions and me being like, all right, like yeah, like you like this, I like this, like let's do it together. And I think that's part of the reason why I've been pretty successful in the last couple of years is because it's like when the pandemic hit, because like I had been building indie, but
Mhm.
like when the pandemic hit, you know, like everybody else was losing my fucking mind and had read Nikki Sloan's Filthy Rich American series and was like, I think I'm into father-in-law stuff. Like, I'm like, okay. And so I like had all these feelings and like wrote this book in 6 days, which became Your Dad Will Do. And like was like, no, like literally on Twitter, like I can't write a book where she, you know, hooks up with her cheating ex's dad. And Twitter's like, but you could. And then I did. And like, and it became this very like
Twitter is your
magical,
enabler.
right? They are. And it's become like a thing that I'm known for, which like for better or worse is that like people are like, oh yeah, I see you tweeting some shit and I know that it's coming. And
It's your
so
forecast. It's all right.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's been
It's that fandom. Like people are involved every step. Like I don't think there's any part of that that I mean you've connected to something that's
yeah,
real.
and it's so fun. I mean, there are pitfalls in that like at the end of this last year, I realized that I can't maintain the pace that I was writing at. And like, I was like careening at burnout and sort of took the turn on two wheels, which means that a couple of my series are on hold for this year and people are understandably upset. And I'm happy that they want books for me, but it's hard to be like, well, I can't, you know, I am putting out 6 releases this year, but like 4 of them are novellas and, you know, I have to slow down. And most people are super understanding and I deeply appreciate that. But it's sometimes that I have a hard time managing that expectation because I like to make people happy. And so having to be like, sorry, I can't write that book right now. Like my brain just won't cooperate.
And you have, I mean, part of that connection with fans all along the way is you've broken down a bit of a boundary, right?
Sorry.
So it's like,
Dog.
is that your dog?
Yeah.
Dogs everywhere. But you've broken down that boundary. So, readers feel so invested and feel, like that it's okay to sort of tell you, which is
Yeah.
tricky. That's so tricky. Can you tell me, I mean, it's like torture. It's like writer torture porn. I just had one of the worst cases of
Sorry.
burnout that I've ever had. And will you tell me what oh, look at that dog. Is this the Great Dane?
Yeah, this is one of them. Here, dude, come here. He's like, no. He's like, can I get closer to you? Like,
I'd like to be down your shirt,
okay,
though.
yeah, go. Yeah, he's like, no, because he's big enough that he's like, if I hold very still, you won't see me, even though I'm right here. Like, all right, sorry, go ahead.
So the burnout,
Yeah.
like when you were in the heat of this, before burnout happened, can you tell me like what a day looked like? Because you were producing so much.
Yeah, so I would write like I would get up because this was like the kids were all out of school and like so there was no time had no meaning. And
no meaning. There were no rules. They were feral. You were feral.
yeah, and the only place I could be alone was in my office. Like only interrupted like once every 10 minutes instead of once every 30 seconds. And so like I would work my prime work hours are in the morning, like they just are. And so I'd work in the morning until like noontime. And then I'd go out and have lunch, and then people start asking me for things. I'm like, I guess I'm just going to go back in my office. And then I'd go back in my office, be like, well, I'm here. I might as well just work some more. And it was definitely like unhealthy coping mechanisms. But yeah, I was writing. I mean, it's like I was writing a shit ton of words, but it was really only like 3-ish thousand words a day, which is a lot, but it's not like I wasn't writing like 10K a day or anything like that. Like
But you were doing 3K days consistently.
Yeah, like every single day.
Yeah.
And so now I'm down to like maybe 2 if I'm lucky. Like my pace is definitely slowed, for better or worse. And so I'm trying to like make room in my schedule just to like not be packed to the gills. But it's hard because it's like I want to, like there's so many cool projects, I want to do them all, and I have to be like, no, like stop it, time out, like you have to leave room, because I need that room to have a creative project if I want one, or just not, or just go slow.
Yeah, or just repair and recover.
Yeah.
So as a person who is a pantser and does have a lot of input, what what are your edits like? Listen to me, like getting right into it. Katee, tell me what it's like in your brain.
I will say, like, the input, like I don't ask people for like their opinions, because I don't really want, or for the input, like I don't be like, hey, what should I do? Because I don't really want people to tell me what to do, because then I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, because I'm like spiteful and perverse. But I would put stuff out to have people be like, oh my god, like the spicy scenes and stuff, just to get that like that frenzy kind of thing of like, I'm like, you like it, I like it, we like it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, my edits on my indie stuff, for like, if it's shorter than 40,000 words, I just do copy edits, because those books are not meant to be anything other than exactly what they are, which is like really hot, spicy, no plot, no character, just spice. On my longer ones, I usually add 20 to 30,000, or well, between 10 and 30,000 words in edits, just because I write so like shallow,
sparse.
Sparse. And so I need my editor to go through, and like my my Dark Olympus editor and I have this kind of agreement that I'm like, on the first draft, or like the first round of edits, just go through, like you don't need to explain, just like on the stuff, but just tag like world building opportunity here, world build here, because like I'm just like, oh, I know the world, why do I have to explain it again? But it's like, somebody might pick up that book and not.
Right.
And so, but that's kind of our like happy medium in between, like, obviously the normal editing stuff. But yeah, I usually add a whole lot of words.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really something. And then I feel like on top of all of this that you've done, you've also like figured out like Patreon and Kickstarter and all this stuff. Like you are like, it's kind of inspiring to watch somebody be like, yeah, I'm just gonna fucking learn it. Like I know, I'm just gonna do it. Like,
well, and Patreon came because actually from the Mob series, because people kept like the final couple, they're like, we want check-ins with this series, and at that point I was like, I can't justify just doing this for free. Like, and we as romance author, we give away a lot of free content, and like that's super awesome. But I was like, so I created the Patreon solely to have, if like they nominate and vote every single month, and I write like a short check-in, which like a chapter essentially. And
chicken.
Yeah, it's been nice, because like,
is that lingo from, what is that lingo from?
The chapter?
Chicken?
Chapter?
I heard chicken.
No, that's just me. It's the whiskey.
It's whiskey we're drinking.
Yeah, so they vote every month, like, and we lately have been wild, and like this month it's like something bonkers with tentacles, and I'm like, okay, sounds great. It's actually kind of a fun creative writing exercise, because it's like, okay, because I've opened it up to them doing non-canon things, or nominated non-canon things, and so sometimes they're like, oh, I want to see this pairing that would definitely not be happen in your books, but like I want to know what would happen. And none of those have won yet, but they keep getting nominated, so I'm curious.
Oh, their time is coming.
Yeah.
Wow. Katee, that is really remarkable. And when you think about, like, I can only imagine as someone who had a similar experience, like when 2018 came around and you were just like, I'm broke, I can't pay my bills. you could not have imagined. You could not have imagined that this is where you would be.
No, well, and it's like my goal because like in 2018 I managed to find my feet enough that I'm like, okay, like I can pay my portion of like the household bills in 2019. And then I was like, because my husband was a framer, and I was like, and like we sat down, I'm like, how much do I have to make for you to quit? Because it's hard on the body. He had all these health problems and stuff because he's been doing it since he was like 13.
Right.
And he's like, you have to make this much. And so I was like, okay. And so I was working towards it, like getting there. But then last year, TikTok, and like I was able to pay for him to have back surgery, like,
Oh,
and
hey!
yeah, it's crazy. And like he quit his job, and I mean, the man lands on his feet because he managed to get this like nice, lovely job with an amazing boss that's only him and his boss that work together with full benefits. And I'm like, nobody gets that job. Like, how the fuck did you, sir?
Wow, this is awesome though.
So, but yeah, so that like it's just I don't think I've fully processed that it's happening because I'm like, I like working, I like writing these stories, like the other stuff's really cool and I'm very excited. But if I think about it too hard, just because in 2012 I had a breakout hit in like the tail end of 50 Shades, and then it went downhill because that's how it works. Is you're in this career long enough, you get the peaks and valleys, and so now it's just like I'm like in a peak, and I'm like, shore up the defenses, like get everything going because the valley is going to come and we got to make sure it's good. And like my husband's like, what if the valley doesn't come? I'm like, it's coming. Yes. I'm like, we have to be prepared. And he's like, okay. I'm like, this might be trauma. It's fine. It's good.
Wow. Oh, Katee. So tell us, if you can, what is next for you you've got some monster romance coming out with these amazing covers. Like, what else have you got coming out in the next little stretch? Because I know you've planned out your year pretty good.
So I have actually a Dark Olympus novella that'll be free March 1st. And it's Medusa and Calypso. It's a sapphic. She's it's another murder. I was supposed to murder you, but I have sweaty palms. And so she's supposed to murder the mistress of this like upper tier dude, Odysseus. It's a Odysseus slander account. And so her and Calypso, it's their romance, and it's a sexy little novella. And then the monster romance, The Dragon's Bride, which is basically Beauty and the Beast, except he's a giant dragon man with 2 eggplants. And
as dragons might just have had.
Listen, I don't make the rules. I just look at the freaking fan art. And yeah, that whole project is like the most self-indulgent thing I've ever done in my entire life. I was like, I want clench covers, and I'm like into monster romance. Like, what if I wrote monster romance that had like old school clench covers? And so I did, and I'm doing it.
And people are loving it. Like, people are ready for it. I can't wait to see if that's like old school clinch covers.
I just want them to come back, like
a little bit, yeah.
Like, or even just
the paintings.
Like, we're almost there. We're on illustrated covers. It would not take that much. Like, and some of those illustrated covers are quite sexy. Like, just push it a little bit more. I'm like, please.
The donut in the guy's hand and the plate in the lady's hand, and yeah.
Yes, that's like my goal. I'm like I cannot say that I'm a trendsetter, but I'm like, you should let me peer pressure you into doing this, please. Like,
yeah, well, we need some excitement. Your covers are like some of the most exciting covers to come around for a while. Like, we're starving for that kind of like something new in romance.
Yeah, it's what's funny because like the Dark Olympus covers are not new, like in Rome, like because indie, that's what they are. Like, they're very on trend for indie dark romance, but in traditional right now, there's not much like it out there. And like every time I see them on a list of like whatever romance, it's like cute candy colored and like Dark Olympus. And it's just, I wish that, like, I understand why it's happening, why the cover trends are so strong for illustrated covers, but I do wish that traditional would pay more attention to indie, because you can tell indie is so niche marketed down with their covers that like you can tell exactly what you're getting based on the packaging. And I think readers really, love that, because it's like, I know I'm getting a dark romance with a dark cover with an object on it and like some like a particular kind of font. Like,
yeah,
I know exactly.
And meanwhile, the cartoon covers are making everybody furious because
Well,
80% of them aren't even a little bit funny.
no,
And
and
that's
or
how
they
you
have
see
like
it.
really heavy content, or
Yeah.
like, or they're really sexy. Like you just can't. They're the like the context clues that we normally get from covers just aren't there in this case, and it's super frustrating. And some of them are like women's fiction,
Yeah.
and it's just like I won't read them unless it's either an author that I know, like I love, or it's been vetted by a reviewer or a friend that I trust, because I I picked up one and I could not even tell you what it was, but it like, and I was like, wait, why is there cancer in the first chapter? Like, no, I'm reading for escapism purposes.
This
I
cover
don't
is
want
pink with cartoons on it. No. Yeah.
right. Like I'm like, no, that I didn't sign up for that. So I mostly stick with like vetted authors, or you know, specifically recommended by people I trust. Because otherwise, I stick with indie because I know what I'm getting when I pick up those books.
Well, I feel like everybody has vetted your books to the like it's exciting. It's so exciting. We're getting sort of a bit spammed, but we had two comments in my weird interface. If you don't log on there, you're called Facebook user. So if I just wanted to make sure that Katee saw your comments, Facebook user. Hi, Katee. Cannot wait to read Electric Idol. Thanks, Facebook user. And another thing, I'm 70% into EI and my jaw's on the floor. The intention in the world building in the whole series is blowing me away. I could not agree more.
It's funny because like there are people that are have strong feelings about the fact that they're not like accurate retellings, but people who are very familiar with the myths like get those Easter eggs throughout, that it's like, no, like I didn't just like be like, I'm just gonna sort of tell a story about a thing I don't know about. Like I try to put in stuff so like if you know kind of things, because it pleases me on a creative level to be like, did you notice that? Did you pick that up?
I mean, I think that's the joy of a retelling. I mean, I think as we're inundated with, Jane Austen retellings that aren't Jane Austen retellings even a little bit, like I mean, it's not, you can't just call the character Darcy. You've got to give us a little bit more. And I mean, I think that's why readers, particularly now with the pandemic, where we're all want comfort reads, a retelling, we know what we're going to get, but it's new and exciting. And your books are new and exciting. Katee, thank you. Oh, wait, you got another one. Missy Lynn. Oh, sorry. Thanks for giving us a great plus sized heroine.
I honestly, the response to that has like made me cry a couple times, because like I tried really hard to like make sure that like that Psyche was like good rep, and like I love her so much. So the fact that she's resonating with readers like makes me a little emotional.
Yeah, she has that great internal thought where she's like, I've worked really hard. She's worked really hard to be kind and decent and feel good about herself, but sometimes she's reminded that other people haven't done that work, right? And then I was like, yeah, that's good rep. That's good rep. So Katee, thank you. I said that this would be 30 minutes long. We're at 50.
I'm having fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Katee, this has been a real pleasure. Good luck to you and all of this madness that you're in right now. It's pretty fun to watch. I can't wait to see what happens next for you. Everybody out there, pick up Electric. If you haven't picked up Neon Gods, grab that first.
Book. Boom. Look at that promo. Yeah. It's almost like a professional occasionally.
I read everything on my e-reader, so I never have a paperback. But everybody out there, please stay safe, have a drink, read a book, get vaccinated. Thanks, guys.